The top 20 albums of 2023 have been revealed, and this list came together, the 13th annual list from Blues Rock Review, through a 50% fan vote and a 50% staff vote. Now, the staff is the people like Willie and myself who've written the reviews for Blues Rock Review over the course of the year. So the staff's vote counts for 50%, and then the fans can vote, and that counts for 50%. We combine the two together, and that's how the top 20 list comes together. So let's check out the list. Coming in at number 20, we have Parker Barrow, Jukebox Gypsies. 19, Foghat, Sonic Mojo. 18, Anthony Rosano and the Conquerors, Cheat the Devil. Coming in at 17, Ali Venable, Real Gone. At 16, Savoy Brown, Blues All Around. 15, Dom Martin, Buried in the Hail. 14, Paul Rogers, Midnight Rose. 13, Bernie Marsden, Working Man. Number 12, Robert Finley, Black Bayou. Number 11, The Rolling Stones, Hackney Diamonds. Number 10, Dwayne Betts, Wild and Precious Life. Number 9, Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Dirt on My Diamonds, Volume 1. Number 8, Government Mule, Peace Like a River. Number 7, Ghost Towns, First Last Time. Number 6, Rival Sons, Dark Fighter. Number 5, When Rivers Meet, Aces Are High. Joe Bonamassa comes in at number 4 with Blues Deluxe Volume 2. Number 3, Robert John and the Wreck, Ride Into the Light. Number 2, Samantha Fish and Jesse Dayton, Death Wish Blues. And the number 1 album of 2023, Mike Zito and Albert Castiglia, Blood Brothers. Willie, okay, what are your thoughts on the top 20 albums of 2023?
I think top 20, obviously you're going to get a smattering of votes, a bunch of people on there that, of course, I put on my list, some that I didn't, some of mine are excluded. I'll just talk briefly 1 and 2, Blood Brothers. And if we talk about Death Wish Blues, those two, I think it's interesting. They're both collaborations. They're both first-time collaborations. They take very different approaches. When we talk about Blood Brothers, I think that is more of, it is a guitar collaboration. Their voices, both Castiglia and Zito, I thought their voices, I got to listen to that Live in Canada album, which is essentially a rehash of Blood Brothers done live. It is a wonderful live album. The songs translate well. The two of them work together so well, not just vocally, but also in guitars. I'm not surprised that that's number 1. That was an album in my top 5. Same thing with Death Wish Blues. Very different in that regard. Much more scattershot approach. We're talking, for lack of a better term, Pete, modern blues. They try some different avenues. Pretty much everything works out, and they took some risks. So I'm really happy to see them getting rewarded for taking those risks. I'm happy that we see 2 new coming collaborations at the top of the list. Other things are not huge surprises. Joe Bonamassa and Kenny Wayne up there in the ranks. That's not surprising. They always turn out great stuff. I can go on and gush about this and that, or I could muse about which might have been higher. Pete, I'd like to know, more than anything, what always surprises me are albums that I have in like the top 20. I've got 2 this year that I had in the top 10 that aren't even on the list. Pete, do you have a couple of big surprises that you were maybe a little saddened that some of your favorite horses didn't make the starting line?
Yeah, Willie, well, I have a few. I would go with Jeremy Albino, Tears You Hide. I really, really enjoyed that album. It's an album more people need to hear. Matthew Scott, Mears, came out later in the year. Not a lot of people have heard that album, but it's really, really good and worth checking out. Matthias Latine, Up Next. That's an album I really enjoyed. Again, another album that came out later in the year. He's really young, newcomer on the scene. More people need to hear that album. ZZ Ward put out a really good album. I liked Eddie 9Volt's Capricorn album. I mean, really, I can go on all day. There's a lot of great albums. And this year, the list was really, really tough to crack because this was really the first year coming out of the pandemic where everybody was kind of all in, back in with music, and everyone's back out on the road and touring. And so you had a lot of albums that artists were sitting on during the pandemic and waiting to release. And now we got this huge, massive influx of albums that came out this year. So really the competition was very, very, very steep to get on this list. Looking at the list, a lot of deserving artists. I think that Blood Brothers album, Willie, is absolutely fantastic. Yes. A great collaboration between Zito and Castiglia. The chemistry that those two have is tremendous. That album was produced by Joe Bonamassa and Josh Smith. This is the second straight year Joe Bonamassa and Josh Smith produced the #1 album. Last year was Larry McCray, Blues Without You. This album, really, you talked about all the guitar playing, but the songs are fantastic on here too. I mean, the musicianship and the songwriting mesh together, and the chemistry between those two is dynamite. So
Yeah.
I had that album in my top 5 as well, Willie. Did very well in both the staff vote and the fan vote. So an absolutely great album. You mentioned Samantha Fish and Jesse Dayton, another killer album, nominated for the Grammy. They're taking the blues and pushing the boundaries and going in so many different directions. It's really, really cool. Fantastic album. So yeah, I mean, every year it's such a tough list to get on. Willie, what are some of your albums that you thought were maybe, not on the list and should have been there?
I think the eternal polarizing subject of Greta Van Fleet. Okay, I get it. I know I stand on one side of this argument. I had their album in the top 10 on my list. They don't even crack the top 20. I don't know what to say. I think it's just a matter of, do you like their shtick? And in some ways it is a shtick, but I think it's great music. They have great rock and roll. I really enjoyed it. Or do you hate them? You can't stand them. I think they're a splitting vote. I would have thought they could find a place in the top 20. Apparently not. That's less of an issue to me. The one that really sort of broke my heart is I hated seeing Eddie 9-Volt left off. The Capricorn album was one of my favorites this year. It was in my top 5. It wasn't just in my top 20, Pete. It was in my top 5, nowhere in the top 20. I think it maybe didn't get the exposure amongst our readership. And I think the reason why for his album is that it's almost blues soul. You listen to the album a couple times and you could, if I told you, Pete, it was a soul album, you wouldn't look at me like I had 6 heads. You'd say, okay, this is pretty bluesy, but yeah, this is some great soul. So I think that part of what maybe detracted from that as far as voting, it doesn't detract from the album, is just that maybe he gets sort of a split vote. People don't look at it maybe as truly, I don't know, true enough to the genre, but I miss out on that. Pete, another thing I thought of is I looked at 3 albums and I put these 3 albums or 3 artists essentially in the same group: Foghat, Paul Rodgers, and the Rolling Stones. Now, I think they're all decent albums. I didn't particularly love any of the 3 of them. They're not bad by any means. They're good. I think that none of the 3 are the best work of the respective artists. Pete, do you think they are deserving of a place on this list? And whether you do or don't, did you have a favorite of the 3? Do you think there's one out of the 3 that maybe put in a better effort than the other 2?
If I had a personal favorite from the 3, I really liked the Paul Rodgers album.
Okay.
I mean, it was short and sweet, but to me, I thought it was a fantastic album. Obviously, the Rolling Stones, they've got that name recognition, but a lot of people that I've been talking to, a lot of artists have loved that album. And so I'm not surprised to see it on the list. Foghat's album just went #1. I thought it was a solid album. #1 on the Billboard Blues chart. Actually, Foghat's first ever #1 album on the Billboard Blues chart, which is pretty crazy when you think about that being their first #1 album, but it was. And so, yeah, I'm not really surprised any of them are on the list, Willie. I mean, I think they're all solid albums.
Well, most importantly, Pete, I think it's the conversation, and this would be the time we turn it over to our viewers and to our readers. For all of those who voted, thank you so much for voting. But guess what? In the court of public opinion, the voting isn't over yet. Tell us how stupid I am for my selections. Tell Pete how foolish he is for not having Dwayne Betts' album higher on his list, Pete.
Hey, I had
Wink, wink.
that album was pretty high on my list, actually, Willie.
Not high enough for me, Pete. Listeners, viewers, put some comments in the comments. If you like what we're doing, let's get ready for 2024 by leaving a thumbs up, and we'll catch you on the next time. For Willie Witten, that's Pete Francis. This has been the Blues Rock Show.